What's going on, guys? It's Pete Nova from the Face Off Sports Network. I am back with my running back tiers slash rankings for week 13 to help you win your fantasy football matchups. Let's just jump right into it. In tier one, it's going to start with Saquon Barkley taking on the Baltimore Ravens. Then you have Joe Mixon versus Jacksonville, Devon Achane versus Green Bay, Jameer Gibbs versus Chicago, Christian McCaffrey versus Buffalo, and Derek Henry taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. I do want to focus here on Jameer Gibbs. Jameer Gibbs is taking on Chicago this week. Chicago is 12th when it comes to points given up to running backs. So they give up the 12th most points to running backs in fantasy. They've given up 10 total touchdowns this season to running backs, 47 receptions, possibly no David Montgomery this week. And if he does play, he might be limited. It is a short week as they do play this Thursday on Thanksgiving. Um, you know, Jameer Gibbs has scored 19 or more points in 4 out of the last 6 games. We have a high total here too, projected from Vegas. And Jameer Gibbs has been doing this with a split backfield with David Montgomery. So I feel pretty good about him this week. He very well could steal the show on Thanksgiving and finish as the RB1. Moving over to tier two, it's going to start off with Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara takes on the Los Angeles Rams, who just let Saquon Barkley run wild against them. Then you have Bijan Robinson at 8, taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. Kyron Williams at 9, taking on the Saints, who have been a nice, favorable matchup to running backs this year. Brees Hall, who's dealing with a knee injury. We're going to obviously monitor that. That could change things depending on his status for the game. He takes on Seattle. Josh Jacobs, who had an amazing week last week at 11, taking on Miami. And then Bucky Irving here as my RB12 to close out tier two. Bucky Irving was the headline for this video last week. He had a phenomenal week. That breakout that we've been waiting for. He's been getting better and better every week. And to be honest, he probably already did break out, but this was more of a dominant performance that we haven't seen from him. He takes on the Carolina Panthers, who Carolina gives up the most points to running backs in fantasy in PPR this year. 6 running backs have scored 20 or more fantasy points versus the Panthers. And Irving is pretty much the RB1 in this backfield. I think that was pretty obvious last week. He did have 34 snaps. So, he's still close to like a little bit over 50% of the snap work. But it just feels like this team more and more is leaning on him as the back that they trust and rely on the most. And he caught 3 or more passes in 5 games straight. So he's getting a lot receiving work, which we were worried about Rashad White, kind of holding on to that receiving work load and limiting Bucky Irving. But it seems like he's holding up in pass pro, and the team is trusting him on third downs more and more this year. Kicking off to our tier 3, we have James Cook. James Cook takes on the San Francisco 49ers, who are kind of in disarray right now. Then you have Jonathan Taylor, who's just been pretty disappointing, but he gets an awesome matchup against the New England Patriots at 14. Chuba Hubbard versus Tampa Bay at 15. Chase Brown at 16, taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. David Montgomery, who is banged up, versus Chicago, and Kenneth Walker at 18 versus the New York Jets. I do want to focus here on Chuba Hubbard a little bit. Chuba Hubbard has been a really awesome value for fantasy, him and Bucky Irving, who we just talked about. Jonathan Brooks, we were worried about like dominating this backfield once he comes back. It seems like they're slowly ramping him up. It took them a while to activate him. Then in his first game active, he only played like 5 snaps, I believe, last week. And he's going up against a Bucs defense who give up the 4th most points to running backs in fantasy this season. Chuba Hubbard was not one of my guys last week. I did fade him. I took the under on his rushing prop at like 52. I think he had 53 last week. But he in 4 of the last 16 games, he scored 13 points or more, giving you a really solid floor for a fantasy running back 2, which in tier 3, that's pretty much where he's at. And, like I said, I mean, he scored in 4 of the last 6 games since week 1. The lowest output he's had in a week is 9 points. So he's giving you a really consistent floor, and he scored against Kansas City last week, 13 points, got a touchdown, and that's the number one running, defense when it comes to running backs in fantasy football. So I like Chuba Hubbard this week. I don't know how much he's going to outperform where he is currently, but he is somebody to monitor. I think he finishes as a mid RB2. I think he has high end RB2 potential this week. Now, closing out here, we're looking at tier 4. We're going to start it off with James Conner. James Conner has been a fountain of youth. He had a tough week last week, but he gets Minnesota this week as my RB19. Then you have Aaron Jones here as RB20 taking on he takes on Aaron Jones takes on Arizona. James Conner is from Arizona. And so they're RB19 and 20. Rashad White here at 21, taking on Carolina. Tony Pollard here taking on Washington at 22. Najee Harris at 23, taking on Cincinnati, and Tyrone Tracy at 24. Tyrone Tracy is not the guy I want to talk too much about, but I do want to say, right now, it looks like Tommy DeVito is not going to play. It looks like Drew Lock might be the starter. And, he's Tyrone Tracy. He's not worrying me. It's nothing against him. He does have a fumbling issue right now, the last few games. And I do worry that Devin Singletary may start to get an uptick in touches. Dayball's on the hot seat, and you just can't have plays and mistakes like that. Right now this offense just looks completely out of whack. But I did want to take a focus on Rashad White here, who I have listed as my RB21. I know we talked about Bucky Irving, and these are two guys from the same backfield, but I think Rashad White being as my RB21, not too high, not too low. Rashad White opportunities are dropping. He no longer has 50% or more of the workload. He's somewhere around like 45%. But he played 29 snaps last week to Bucky Irving's 34. Carolina, like I said, gives up the most fantasy points to running backs in the NFL in PPR. And 6 running backs have scored 20 or more fantasy points against the Panthers, like we talked about. But 4 times this year, RB2, like 2 running backs on a single team have scored double-digit fantasy points for their team. So we look at that and we say there is a possibility a guy like Bucky Irving scores like 20 to 25 points this week. And a guy like Rashad White still gets that 12 to 15 point range. I mean, we've seen it this season with this defense to fantasy running backs. But that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you're still here, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Appreciate all the support that I've gotten from you guys. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. Make sure you are subscribed, and I'll see you guys next time.